9 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defense DST units I have as sleepers this week. The first one, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Jaguars, middle of the pack type of defense this season here. A couple good games under their belt, and then a few games where they didn't do much for fantasy football. But this week here, decent matchup versus the Vegas Raiders. Last week we saw them come off a horrible ball game where they didn't do anything. Was this Raider team getting shut out by a mediocre to poor defense in New Orleans with a lot of guys in their secondary out. And this week here, now they got to travel to Jacksonville. Obviously, the weather's going to be nice. Obviously, it's a different ball game. But Derek Carr, I don't think he's 100% at all. And obviously, he's popped up on the injury report. Limited practice with a back injury. He's going to play in this game, though, is Derek Carr. But this Jacksonville Jaguar team, I think, can make a few plays. And from what we saw last week here, when Derek Carr and Davante Adams are pretty much shut out in a ball game, that's a huge problem, and it's something maybe the Jaguars could pick up on in this ball game. So right now, in deepest of leagues, I would use them as a sleeper option, available in 72% of fantasy leagues, and maybe they can make things happen versus the Raiders this week. The next defense, DST units, the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seahawks in a matchup at the Arizona Cardinals, and right now, obviously, they know what the Cardinals, the way they play the game, and they shut them down in Week 6. 3 points allowed, 6 sacks, an into, and a fumble recovery. Good for 17 fantasy points. And over the last few weeks, the Seahawk defense, they've been playing some pretty solid football. 17 points in Week 6 versus Arizona. Week 7 at the Chargers, 7. And then last week versus 6-1 Giant team, even though I know their offense isn't all that great besides Saquon Barkley. 13 fantasy points with 13 points allowed, 5 sacks, and 2 fumble recoveries. So right here with another matchup at Arizona this week where they got to Kyler Murray early and often in that game. I think this defense could put on some pressure. But I also could see things being a shootout in a way as well. But obviously they're a deep league sleeper is the Seahawk defense, and they're available in 74% of fantasy leagues. And the third and final defense I have as a sleeper this week is the Los Angeles Chargers. So the Chargers actually in my top 12 rankings, I had them ranked this week here. I believe at number 9 this week on the defensive side of things. So to me, they're not really a sleeper, but to a lot of fantasy owners, this Charger defense is a sleeper this week, available in 71% of fantasy leagues. And I know over the last few weeks, they really haven't done much. Week 6 versus Denver, 7. Week 7 versus Seattle, 4. And then went on bye. But right now, coming off a bye week, being refreshed, hopefully gets this defense going. And I know they lost J.C. Jackson for the season, and Joey Bosa is still out with his injury. But this Falcon team's pretty much a one-dimensional team that loves to run the football, either with Marcus Mariota and with their 2 running backs and Algier and Huntley back there, even though there's a possibility Cordell Patterson could come back in this game. But I think the Chargers coming off the bye and wanting to make a playoff push right now is this Charger team. After losing a tough one to Seattle before the bye week here, losing by 2 touchdowns, is going to come out and pride themselves on defense. And what's a better way to get right than versus a young and unproven Atlanta Falcon offense? So that's a few defense DST units I have as sleepers here for Week 9 of the fantasy football season.